The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of money, a cloying mix of imported lilies, vintage perfume, and the faint, metallic tang of ambition, light from a dozen crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small car, fractured against diamond necklaces and the polished faces of Chicago's elite, creating a galaxy of cold, indifferent stars. This was the Blackwood Foundation's annual Innovators Gala, a nationally televised spectacle where fortunes were pledged and reputations were cemented in the warm glow of public philanthropy. And Zara Williams, 28 years old and invisible, was pouring the champagne. She moved with a practiced economy of motion, her black uniform a shadow against the room's opulent golds and creams. Her instructions had been simple: keep the flutes at the head table full, stay out of the camera shots, and under no circumstances make eye contact with the guests. Invisibility was a skill she had perfected over a lifetime in the foster care system, a form of armor against a world that was quick to notice a mistake, and even quicker to assign blame. A memory, sharp and unwelcome, surfaced. She was 10 years old, standing in the kitchen of her third foster home. A woman named Mrs. Gable, whose face was a permanent mask of disapproval, was polishing a silver spoon. "The key to survival, child, is to be invisible," the woman had said, not looking at her. "The nail that sticks up gets hammered down. Never draw attention." Zara had learned the lesson well. She had become a ghost in her own life, moving through rooms and conversations without leaving a trace. Tonight, the head table was a pantheon of modern gods. There was the mayor, a senator, a handful of venture capitalists whose net worth exceeded the GDP of small countries. And, at the center of it all, Harrison Blackwood. At 55, he was still boyishly handsome, with a mane of silver hair and eyes the color of a stormy sky. He was the visionary behind Blackwood Industries, a tech empire that had reshaped modern communication. He was also the man whose family name was stamped on the very building, the city, the world she inhabited. Harrison was in the middle of his keynote address, his voice a smooth baritone, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system. He spoke of progress, of innovation, of the responsibility of the privileged to uplift the less fortunate. Zara approached his place setting, the heavy silver tray balanced expertly on one hand, the chilled bottle of Dom Perignon in the other. Her movements were fluid, silent, designed to be unnoticed. But he noticed. He stopped mid-sentence. The entire ballroom, a sea of 1,000 expectant faces, fell into a profound silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the television cameras adjusting their focus. Harrison Blackwood lowered his microphone slightly, his gaze falling upon Zara as she tilted the bottle over his empty flute. His eyes, which had been warm and charismatic moments before, turned to chips of ice. He didn't speak to her. He spoke to the audience, to the cameras, to the world. "It is a testament to the allure of progress," he said, a cruel smirk playing on his lips, "that some people, it seems, will do anything to get closer to the stage." Zara froze, the bottle hovering over the glass. A collective, muted gasp rippled through the room. The cameras swiveled, their red recording lights blinking like predatory eyes. She was no longer invisible. She was the center of a nationally televised humiliation. "Security," Harrison said, his voice laced with theatrical annoyance as he pointed a manicured finger directly at her. "Please escort this distraction back to the kitchens where she belongs." Her foster mother's words echoed in her mind. The nail that sticks up gets hammered down. But she hadn't stuck up. He had hammered her down anyway, for sport. Her face burned with a shame so hot it felt like a physical fire. Her hands, usually so steady, began to tremble. The silver tray, heavy with crystal flutes, tilted precariously. She fought to regain her composure, to retreat into the shell of invisibility she had worn for so long. But it was too late. The spotlight was on her, and it was blinding. With an immense effort of will, she steadied the tray, placed the champagne bottle back on it, and straightened her back. She did not scurry away. She turned, her posture erect, her chin held high, and began the long, agonizing walk of shame across the vast ballroom. Every eye was on her. She could feel their judgment, their pity, their morbid curiosity. That's when she saw it. As Harrison turned back to the microphone, gesturing with his hand to dismiss the incident, the stage lights caught the glint of a ring on his finger. It wasn't a simple wedding band. It was an ornate, intricate piece, a large, deep blue sapphire set in a nest of white gold, with delicate Celtic knots engraved along the band. The breath caught in her throat, a painful, ragged gasp. Her steps faltered. The world around her, the silent crowd, the opulent ballroom, the crushing weight of her humiliation receded into a dull, distant roar. All she could see was that ring. The exact ring from her mother's faded photograph. The one and only link to a past she'd never known. A photograph she had clutched in her tiny fist when she was found. A 3-year-old Jane Doe, on the steps of an orphanage 25 years ago. She stopped. She couldn't help it. The shock was a physical blow, rooting her to the spot. She turned her head slowly, her eyes locking with Harrison Blackwood's across the cavernous room. He saw the change in her expression, the dawning horror and disbelief. "My mother," she whispered, her voice too faint to carry, but the words forming on her lips, clear and undeniable. She had that ring. Harrison Blackwood's face, which had been a mask of arrogant dismissal, went slack. The color drained from it, leaving it a waxy, spectral white. The smirk vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock, a look of a man who had just seen a ghost walk through a wall. In that single, frozen moment, the power dynamic in the room shifted irrevocably. She was no longer just a humiliated server. She was a question he had never thought he would have to answer. The slam of her apartment door echoed the violent hammering in her chest. The room was a testament to a life lived on the margins. Peeling paint curled from water-stained walls. A single mattress on the floor served as her bed, and a stack of milk crates doubled as a dining table. Red-stamped overdue bills were scattered across the top crate, a paper monument to her constant, losing battle with poverty. Her hands still shook from the adrenaline of the gala, from the sheer force of Harrison's public contempt. A dark, ugly bruise was already beginning to bloom on her wrist, where a security guard had gripped her too tightly while escorting her out the service entrance. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the roaring confusion in her mind. With trembling fingers, she reached under her mattress and pulled out a worn manila envelope. Inside, carefully wrapped in a plastic bag to protect it from the persistent leak in her ceiling, was her only sacred object. She slid the photograph out. The edges were soft and worn smooth from 25 years of desperate handling. A woman smiled back at her. She was beautiful, with warm, intelligent amber eyes, the same eyes Zara saw in her own reflection. Her skin was a rich, warm brown, and her dark hair was a cascade of natural curls. And, on her ring finger, gleaming against her skin, was the sapphire ring. White gold, intricate Celtic engravings, a deep blue stone that seemed to hold its own light. It was not a similar ring. It was the exact ring. Zara's heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. For 25 years, this photograph had been her only clue. She'd been found outside St. Mary's Children's Home on a freezing December morning, A toddler dressed in expensive clothes that were starkly out of place. No note, no identification. Just this picture. Sister Catherine, the elderly nun who had taken her in, always said she'd spoken with a strange, lilting accent, not quite American. For weeks, she had cried for Mama, pointing at the photograph until her voice was a raw, hoarse whisper. She flipped the photo over. The elegant, looping handwriting in faded blue ink was as familiar to her as her own name. My darling Zara, someday you'll understand. Love transcends all boundaries. Forever yours. Maria. Maria, not Margaret. The name the media had always associated with Harrison Blackwood's late wife. Maria. The name she had whispered to herself on countless lonely nights in a dozen different foster homes. A prayer to a woman she couldn't remember, but desperately needed to believe had loved her. Why had she been abandoned? What terrible event could have forced this woman with love in her eyes to leave her child on a cold stone step? Tonight's humiliation at the gala felt like a distillation of her entire life, invisible, disposable, a problem to be removed. But that ring, on that man's hand, changed the entire narrative. It wasn't just a random act of cruelty from a rich man. It was something more. It was a connection. She grabbed her laptop, the screen a spider web of cracks, and waited an eternity for it to boot up. Her fingers flew across the sticky keyboard, typing in the name that had dominated the city's headlines for decades: Harrison Blackwood wife. The search results loaded with excruciating slowness on her spotty Wi-Fi. The first image made her gasp. A formal portrait of Harrison Blackwood with a woman on his arm. The caption read, "Tech mogul Harrison Blackwood and wife, Margaret Blackwood, at the 1998 Mayor's Ball." The woman in the photo was the official Margaret Blackwood, but she was white, blonde hair, styled in a severe, elegant chignon, pale skin, cool blue eyes. She was beautiful, but in a cold, distant way, like a marble statue. She was nothing like the warm, vibrant woman of color in Zara's photograph. Zara's mind reeled. Two different women. A knot of confusion and dread tightened in her stomach. She scrolled down, her eyes scanning the text of a 25-year-old article from the Chicago Tribune. Margaret Blackwood, 27, beloved wife of tech innovator Harrison Blackwood, was killed last night in a tragic single-car accident on a patch of black ice along Lakeshore Drive. Mrs. Blackwood, who was 7 months pregnant with the couple's first child, died instantly. The unborn baby did not survive. 7 months pregnant. The timeline clicked into place with terrifying precision. December 1998. The month she was found. Zara's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. The photo, the ring, the timeline. Her own age it all fit. But the women didn't. Her phone buzzed, the harsh vibration startling her. A text from her catering supervisor. "You're fired. Effective immediately." Mr. Blackwood's office called. He made it very clear you are not to be employed at any event connected to his foundation or his company ever again. The message was cold, final. Harrison Blackwood's power was a swift and merciless thing. In the space of a few hours, he had not only shattered her dignity, but had also snatched away her meager livelihood. She stared at the two faces on her screen, the cold, blonde Margaret and the warm, loving Maria. Two different women, linked by the same name, the same man, the same ring, and the same tragic timeline. One question burned through the fog of her shock and fear, a single point of light in the overwhelming darkness. Which one was the lie? Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Harrison's face, the mask of arrogance crumbling into shock at the mention of the ring. The bruise on her wrist throbbed, a rhythmic reminder of his power and her powerlessness. By dawn, a cold, hard resolve had settled in her soul. Harrison Blackwood had tried to erase her. She would respond by digging up a past he had clearly gone to great lengths to bury. The Chicago Public Library opened at 8. Zara was there at 7:45, waiting on the cold stone steps, nursing a black coffee. Milk and sugar were luxuries for people with jobs. The familiar smell of old paper, binding glue, and lemon polish was a comfort, a scent she associated with safety and knowledge. Researching again. Honey, Mrs. Gable, the head librarian, greeted her with a warm, concerned smile. She was a kind, grandmotherly woman who had known Zara since she was a bookish, lonely child, seeking refuge among the stacks. You know, with that mind of yours, you could have been a detective, always digging into things others miss. Just curious about some local history, Zara said, forcing a smile. The Blackwood family, specifically. Mrs. Gable's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. The tech moguls. That's a deep, dark rabbit hole to go down. Be careful what you find. The microfilm archives are this way. The ancient microfilm machine hummed and clicked, a mechanical heartbeat in the library's quiet depths. Zara scrolled through the digital archives of the Chicago Tribune from December 1998. Headlines flashed by holiday sales, blizzard warnings, political scandals. Then, she found it. Tech Iris dies in tragic accident. The grainy, black and white photo showed the blonde Margaret Blackwood stepping out of a limousine. Zara zoomed in, her pulse quickening. Margaret's hand, waving to the camera, was clearly visible. There was no ring, not the sapphire, not even a simple wedding band. A knot of intrigue tightened in her gut. She printed the article. The details were sparse. Single car accident, icy road, no other vehicles involved, died instantly along with her unborn child. She kept scrolling, digging deeper into the digital graveyard of the city's past. A few days later, another headline. Blackwood family mourns double loss. This article offered more background on Margaret. It described her as a graduate of Harvard Law, a passionate advocate for civil rights, and an active participant in community outreach programs. It was a strange resume for a woman married into the notoriously conservative, old money Blackwood clan. Zara felt a flicker of connection to this version of Margaret, the activist. It felt more real than the icy socialite in the photographs. On a hunch, she broadened her search, looking for any mention of Margaret Blackwood in the months before her death. She found it buried in the society pages. A small announcement dated 6 months before the accident. Margaret Blackwood establishes scholarship for underprivileged youth. The accompanying photo made Zara's blood run cold. It showed Margaret standing with a group of smiling children at a community center on the South Side. They were Black and Hispanic children, their faces bright with a hope that was often in short supply in their neighborhoods. And there, on Margaret's finger, clear as day, was the sapphire ring. Her hand shook as she printed the image. The same ring, the same warm smile from her own treasured photograph. But this Margaret was different. The lighting in the photo was less formal, more natural. Her skin looked warmer, her features subtly softer. Her blonde hair seemed less severe, with a hint of a natural curl escaping her elegant hairstyle. It was as if, for a moment, another woman was peeking through the mask of Margaret Blackwood. Finding what you need. Mrs. Gable had appeared silently beside her, her eyes glancing at the scattered printouts. I think so, Zara whispered. Mrs. Gable, do you remember anything unusual from back then, around 1998? Any stories about missing kids, or adoptions that seemed off? The librarian's eyes narrowed in thought. She looked around the quiet room, then leaned closer, lowering her voice. That was the year of the big scandal at St. Mary's. The orphanage where well, the one downtown. The church tried to keep a lid on it, but the rumors were ugly. Forged adoption records, missing documentation. They said wealthy families were paying cash under the table to bypass the system and get healthy infants. She paused, her gaze searching Zara's face. Why do you ask, dear? Before Zara could formulate an answer, her phone vibrated against the table, the sound startlingly loud in the library's hush. Unknown number. She hesitated, then swiped to answer. Miss Williams. The voice was elderly, gravelly, with a gentle Spanish accent. My name is Robert Martinez. I worked for the Blackwood family for many years. I understand you are asking questions about Maria. Zara's heart stopped. Not Margaret. Maria. How could he possibly know? How did you... Word travels fast when someone starts digging up graves. The man interrupted. Old friends still talk. Can you meet me Lincoln Park Zoo, by the lion exhibit? Noon. Come alone. And bring the papers you just printed. The line went dead. A cold dread, mingled with a sliver of exhilaration, washed over her. Someone had been watching her. The rabbit hole was deeper and darker than she had ever imagined, and she was falling fast. 2 hours later, Zara stood by the lion exhibit, the bitter December wind whipping at her thin jacket. An elderly Hispanic man approached, leaning heavily on a carved wooden cane. His face was a roadmap of a long, hard life, but his eyes were kind as they studied her. You have her eyes, he said, his voice a low rumble. You look just like her. Maria. Not the woman they put in the papers. The real one. You knew my mother. Zara's breath plumed in the frigid air. Robert Martinez nodded, his gaze darting around nervously. I was the Blackwood family gardener for 30 years. I watched that family's secrets grow like poison ivy in their perfect rosebeds. He pulled a worn photograph from his coat pocket. This is the Maria I knew. The photo showed the woman from Zara's own picture, but it was an original, not a copy. The colors were richer, the details sharper. The woman's skin was undeniably brown, her hair a riot of dark, tight curls. It was the same face, but stripped of the careful alterations that had lightened her into someone else. Someone systematically altered every public photograph of her. Zara breathed, the monstrous reality of it settling upon her. Maria wasn't who they claimed, Robert said, his voice barely audible over the distant roar of a lion. Her real name was Maria Elena Santos. She was Afro-Latina, from East L.A., brilliant, Harvard Law, summa cum laude, argued civil rights cases before she was 25. But she had to kill Maria Santos to become Margaret Blackwood and marry into that family. The world tilted. Zara gripped the cold metal railing of the enclosure to steady herself. That's not possible. People can't just erase who they are. Robert gave a hollow, humorless laugh. With enough money, you can make anything possible. Mija, skin lightening treatments, chemical hair straightening, speech therapy to erase her accent, even surgery to narrow her nose. She spent 2 years in a cocoon of doctors and tutors, fabricating a past, forging documents. I watched this vibrant, beautiful woman bleach herself away, piece by piece. A wave of nausea rolled through Zara. Why would anyone do that to themselves? For love, Robert said softly. She met Harrison at a conference. He was different than young, idealistic, not yet the cold man his father wanted him to be. He genuinely wanted to use his wealth for good. Maria thought she could be his partner in that. That together they could change the world. Maybe even change the Blackwood legacy itself. What happened? Robert's face darkened. Charles Blackwood happened. Harrison's father. That man was pure evil in a $3,000 suit. Old money built on exploitation. Old hatreds passed down like family heirlooms. Charles was a virulent racist. The moment he discovered Maria's true heritage, he threatened to disown Harrison, to ruin him, to burn his entire empire to the ground. But she married him anyway. She loved him. And Harrison, to his credit, stood up to his father. For a while, they were happy. Maria started to let little pieces of herself show again. She started the scholarship. She wore her grandmother's ring. He gestured toward Zara's printouts. That ring was a Santos family heirloom, passed down for generations. It was her one act of defiance, her one connection to the woman she used to be. He paused, his expression growing grim. Then she got pregnant. With you. That changed everything. Robert pulled out another photo. It showed a stern-faced man with cold, cruel eyes, Harrison's eyes, but utterly devoid of warmth. Charles Blackwood. Charles gave Maria an ultimatum: disappear forever, or he would destroy Harrison and take the baby the moment it was born. He told her he had connections to a private adoption network and would ensure the child was raised by a proper family. And Harrison would be told the baby died at birth. Tears pricked Zara's eyes. She refused. She did more than refuse. She fought back. Maria was a lawyer. Remember, she started investigating Charles. She found everything: decades of tax evasion, bribery, connections to organized crime. She had enough evidence to send him to prison for the rest of his life. Boxes of it. Financial records, recorded calls, sworn affidavits from people he'd ruined. Robert's hands trembled as he reached into his coat again, this time producing a small, old-fashioned digital voice recorder. She knew he was planning something. 3 days before the accident, she came to me in the greenhouse. She was terrified, but she was determined to protect you. He pressed play. A woman's voice filled the cold air, shaky, but resolute, tinged with the slight, melodic accent that had been erased from the public. Margaret. My name is Maria Elena Santos. If you are hearing this, it is because Charles Blackwood has likely succeeded in killing me. I am 7 months pregnant with Harrison Blackwood's daughter. Charles has threatened to take my baby and place her in an adoption system he controls, telling Harrison she died with me. I will not let him steal my daughter and erase her heritage as he tried to erase mine. I have hidden all the evidence of Charles's crimes in a safety deposit box. Bank of America, Downtown Branch, box number 247. The key is taped beneath a loose floorboard in the nursery I prepared for her. Tears streamed down Zara's face as her mother's voice grew stronger, filled with a fierce, protective love that crossed the barrier of time and death. To my daughter, if you ever find this, your name is Esperanza. Esperanza Santos Blackwood. It means hope. You are my hope. Never forget where you come from. Never let them make you invisible. I fought for you until my last breath. And I pray that someday you will know how much you were and are loved. The recording ended. Robert placed a gentle, weathered hand on Zara's shoulder as she sobbed, the sound muffled by her hands. Esperanza, she whispered, the name feeling both foreign and profoundly right on her tongue. My real name is Esperanza. 3 days later, she was dead, Robert said, his voice thick with ancient grief. Convenient accident, icy road, no witnesses. But you survived. Mija. Charles had you taken from the hospital before Harrison ever knew you'd drawn a single breath. He told Harrison you both died. For 25 years, Harrison has mourned a wife and a daughter, never knowing his own father murdered one and stole the other. Zara's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She answered, her hand shaking. Miss Williams. The voice was female, crisp, and carried the unmistakable authority of a high-priced lawyer. A clipped British accent. My name is Victoria Carter. I am senior partner at Carter, Morrison and Associates, and lead counsel for the Blackwood estate. It has come to our attention that you are engaged in a campaign of harassment against my client. I haven't harassed anyone, Zara stammered, wiping her eyes. Meeting with disgruntled former employees, illegally accessing private family history in the state of Illinois. That constitutes a pattern of behavior that could be construed as stalking, Victoria said, her tone as cold and sharp as surgical steel. However, the Blackwood family is prepared to be generous. I am authorized to offer you a one-time payment of $75,000. In exchange, you will sign a non-disclosure agreement and cease this unfortunate line of inquiry. $75,000. It was more money than Zara had ever seen, enough to solve every problem in her life. And if I refuse? Victoria Carter's laugh was not a sound of humor. It was the sound of a predator baring its teeth. Then we will be forced to pursue legal action. We will bury you in litigation. Miss Williams, we will portray you as a disturbed, opportunistic fraud. We will bankrupt you. We will destroy your reputation, and we will see you charged with extortion. Reputations are so fragile. It would be a terrible shame for yours to be ruined so completely. The line went dead. Zara stood frozen, clutching the recorder that held her mother's voice, her real name echoing in her soul. A threat on one side, a bribe on the other. They had discovered she was still breathing, and now they would stop at nothing to silence her for good. A black sedan was idling across from the zoo entrance, its tinted windows reflecting the bleak Chicago sky like obsidian mirrors. Robert's face was grim. They know, he said, pressing a worn business card into her hand. Charles is dead, but his machine is still running. Victoria Carter has been the family's cleaner for 15 years. She's not just a lawyer, she's an artist of destruction. Why are you doing this? Zara asked, her voice trembling. You're putting yourself in danger. Because I promised your mother, he said, his eyes filled with a deep, weary sadness. And because some secrets are too evil to stay buried. As Robert turned to leave, the passenger door of the sedan opened. A man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit stepped out. He moved with the coiled, efficient grace of a professional predator. He spoke quietly into a discreet earpiece, his eyes scanning the sparse crowd. Zara's phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. Stop digging, or you will join your mother. This is your only warning. Her blood ran cold. The man was walking towards her now, his right hand inside his suit jacket. She had seconds. She turned and ran. Her worn sneakers slapped against the wet pavement as she sprinted through the zoo's winding paths. Her lungs burned. Behind her, she heard heavy, purposeful footsteps and the crackle of a radio. "Security, stop her!" a voice yelled. She burst out onto Cannon Drive, a chaotic river of traffic. She waved her arms frantically at a yellow cab, which screeched to a halt beside her. Bank of America building, downtown. It's life or death. She gasped, tumbling into the back seat. As the taxi pulled away, she saw the man in the suit emerge from the zoo, his face a mask of cold fury. He spotted the cab and started to run, but they were already lost in the anonymity of the city's traffic. "Someone chasing you?" Beta, the driver, a kind-faced Sikh man, asked, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. "Very dangerous people," she breathed. She looked at the business card Robert had given her. James Morrison, private investigator. The name struck her like a physical blow. Carter, Morrison, and Associates, Victoria's law firm. Had Robert betrayed her, led her into a trap? Then she saw the faint, handwritten script on the back of the card, in different ink. "Don't trust the firm. Jim is Maria's cousin. He's been looking for you for 25 years. Call him. Now." Before she could dial, her phone rang again. Unknown number. She answered. "Esperanza." The voice was male, urgent, with a faint accent that echoed her mother's. "This is Jim Morrison. Robert just called me. Are you safe?" "I don't know," she said, her voice shaking. "They were chasing me. I'm in a cab, heading downtown to the bank." "Listen to me," Jim said, his voice a lifeline. "Do not go to your apartment. Do not go anywhere they can find you. Victoria has eyes everywhere. Cops on the payroll. Judges in her pocket. She is not just protecting a client. She is protecting herself." "Robert said you're Maria's cousin." "Our mothers were sisters," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've spent the last 15 years of my life as a PI, searching for Maria's missing daughter. Searching for you." The taxi approached the financial district, the glass and steel towers of downtown Chicago looming like monuments to a power she was now challenging. "The safety deposit box," she whispered. "My mother's recording." "I helped her set it up," Jim said. "But there's something else. Something critical. Harrison has been looking for you, too." The world spun. "What, he thinks I'm dead?" He started to have doubts a few years ago. He hired an outside investigator to look into his father's foundation and found irregularities, money connected to private adoptions. He started to suspect Charles had lied about everything. "He's been searching for you secretly, trying to stay off Victoria's radar." The taxi pulled up to the Bank of America tower, as Zara paid the driver. She saw it, a familiar black sedan pulling up to the curb. Then another, and another. Men in dark suits emerged, spreading out, surrounding the building. "Jim," she whispered into the phone. "They're here. They're everywhere." "This isn't surveillance." Jim's voice was grim. "This is a tactical operation." Through the bank's massive glass doors, she saw Harrison Blackwood himself getting out of a silver Bentley. He looked frantic, his hair disheveled, his eyes wide with a desperate, hunted look. He was searching for her. Their eyes met through the glass. His face went white. Recognition, shock, and 25 years of buried hope crashed over his features. He started toward the entrance, stumbling like a man in a dream. Behind him, Victoria Carter emerged from the lead sedan. She was a vision of cold, lethal elegance. She saw Harrison moving toward the bank, saw Zara inside, and her face hardened into a mask of pure fury. "Miss," a young bank teller said from behind a partition. "Can I help you?" Zara walked to the counter, her mind racing. She placed the tarnished key on the marble. "I need to access safety deposit box number 247. The teller smiled politely. "Of course. Do you have identification and authorization from the box holder?" "I have this." She laid her mother's photograph on the counter. She held up the digital recorder. Outside, Harrison was arguing with a security guard at the door, gesturing wildly in her direction. "I'm sorry, miss," the teller said, his voice firm. without proper documentation. Zara took a deep breath. She had been invisible for 25 years. It was time for the world to see her. "My name is Esperanza Santos Blackwood," she shouted, her voice ringing through the cavernous marble lobby. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. Cell phones emerged from pockets and purses. "My mother was Maria Elena Santos," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "She was forced to change her identity to marry the man outside that door. I was stolen from them at birth by Charles Blackwood and hidden in an illegal adoption ring. The woman in that sedan murdered my mother, and for 25 years, she has tried to erase me." She pressed play on the recorder. Her mother's voice, clear and heartbreaking, filled the silent bank. "My name is Maria Elena Santos. If you are hearing this, it is because Charles Blackwood has likely succeeded in killing me." The lobby exploded. People were live streaming, calling the news. Harrison began pounding on the glass doors, tears streaming down his face, shouting her name. Victoria Carter strode into the bank, her face a thundercloud of rage. "Turn that off," she commanded. "No," Zara said, stepping forward to meet her. "This is justice. This is my mother speaking truth from her grave." Harrison finally burst through the doors, shoving the guard aside. He stumbled toward her, his face a wreck of anguish and disbelief. "Esperanza," he choked out. "Dad," she whispered, the word tasting of a lifetime of longing. They met in the center of the chaos, a father and daughter separated by a generation of lies. "I thought you were dead," he sobbed, his hands hovering, afraid to touch her. "I mourned you every single day." "I know," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "She knew you would have fought for me." Victoria's composure shattered. "Your wife was a fraud," she shrieked at Harrison. "A social climbing mongrel who tricked you. I saved the Blackwood name from her." "You destroyed my family," Harrison roared, stepping in front of Zara, "and you will pay for it." But Victoria laughed, a high, unhinged sound. "You think you've won? I am Charles Blackwood's true heir. He saw it in me, the strength you never had. I protected his legacy. I earned my place. He was my father. You fool. He acknowledged me in private, promised me everything if I proved more worthy than his weak, sentimental son." The confession, raw and venomous, hung in the air. The final, twisted piece of the puzzle. Victoria wasn't just a loyal lawyer. She was Charles's illegitimate, unacknowledged daughter, a woman who had spent her life trying to earn a monster's approval by being more monstrous than he was. Just then, the bank's lockdown alarms blared. The doors sealed shut. The chaos was contained. The trap had been sprung, not on Zara, but on Victoria. It was Jim's final move. He had called the FBI with an anonymous tip about a public confession to murder about to take place. Federal agents swarmed the lobby. "Victoria Carter," an agent said, producing handcuffs. "You're under arrest." As they led her away, her eyes, filled with a terrifying bottomless hatred, locked on Zara. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Prison won't hold me." "Maybe not," Zara said calmly, holding up her phone, which was still recording. "But the internet is forever." In the sudden quiet, Harrison looked at his daughter, the daughter he had thought lost for a quarter of a century. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a sapphire ring, identical to the one Maria had worn. "I had this made for her," he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. "A matching one. I've carried it with me every single day." He slipped it onto Zara's finger, next to her mother's, "Welcome home, Esperanza," he whispered. "Welcome home." The shareholder meeting for Blackwood Industries was not held in a mere ballroom. It was a theatrical production of power, staged in the city's grandest auditorium. A colossal LED screen behind the stage displayed the company logo against a backdrop of shifting data streams. With the NYSE stock ticker crawling relentlessly along the bottom edge, the air hummed with the quiet, predatory energy of immense wealth. This was Victoria Carter's arena, a place where she had orchestrated corporate takeovers and crushed rivals with elegantly worded resolutions. Today, it would be her gallows. Zara, or rather, Esperanza, stood in the wings. She was no longer the invisible server in a drab uniform. She wore a tailored charcoal gray suit, a quiet statement of professionalism and power. Her hair was pulled back, revealing the strong lines of her face and the intelligent, determined amber eyes she had inherited from her mother. In her hand, she held a single share of Blackwood Industries stock, purchased by proxy by her cousin, Jim Morrison. It was her ticket to the microphone. Beside her, Jim squeezed her shoulder. "You're ready for this," he said. "Maria is with you." The first part of the meeting was a blur of corporate procedure. Reports were read, board members were re-elected, and Harrison, looking strained but resolute, delivered a clipped, uninspired speech about fourth-quarter earnings. Then came the Q&A session. "The chair recognizes the shareholder at microphone 3, the moderator droned. That was her cue. Esperanza walked to the microphone, her heels clicking with quiet confidence on the polished floor. A camera found her, and her face appeared on the giant screen behind the board of directors. A low murmur rippled through the auditorium. It was the woman from the bank, the woman whose face had been plastered across every news outlet for weeks. "My name is Esperanza Santos Blackwood," she began, her voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the cavernous hall. "And while I am a new shareholder, my stake in this company is, in fact, 25 years old." She saw Harrison give a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Victoria, seated among the company's legal team, stared at her, her face a mask of controlled loathing. For decades, the Blackwood name has been synonymous with innovation and progress. But a legacy, like a skyscraper, is only as strong as its foundation, and the foundation of this company is rotten. It was built on secrets, on racism, and on murder. She clicked a small remote in her hand. A document appeared on the screen, a financial ledger from Charles Blackwood's personal accounts from 1998. This ledger shows a payment of $500,000 to a private adoption consultancy. 2 days after my mother, Maria Elena Santos, was run off the road and killed. This was the money used to make a living child disappear. Panic began to flicker in the eyes of the board members. The stock ticker at the bottom of the screen, which had been a steady green, began to twitch. The woman responsible for that crime, and for covering it up for 25 years, is sitting in this room. The lead counsel for this corporation, Victoria Carter. Esperanza's gaze was unwavering as she looked directly at Victoria. But her motive wasn't just professional loyalty. It was personal, because Victoria Carter is the illegitimate, unacknowledged daughter of Charles Blackwood. A collective gasp went through the room. Victoria leaped to her feet. "This is an outrageous, slanderous accusation, security. Remove this woman." "Is it?" Esperanza said calmly, clicking the remote again. A photograph filled the screen. It was an old company picnic photo. A young Harrison stood with his arm around Maria. In the background, standing apart, was a sullen, teenage Victoria, her eyes fixed on Charles Blackwood with a look of desperate, unrequited longing. Victoria spent her life trying to prove she was a more worthy heir than the legitimate son. Esperanza continued, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. She was more ruthless, more loyal to Charles's hateful ideology. She hated my mother not just because she was a woman of color, but because my mother had the one thing Victoria could never have: Harrison's love, and a legitimate place in the family she so desperately wanted to own. The stock ticker turned yellow, then red. The number began to drop. 1.5%, 2.3%. These crimes, the murder, the kidnapping, the decades-long cover-up, were all enabled by a culture of fear and silence. A silence that extends even to the highest levels of this company. Her eyes moved from Victoria to her father. There is one more piece of evidence. A piece that wasn't found in a safety deposit box, but was discovered years ago by the CEO himself. The final image appeared on the screen. It was a copy of a canceled check. A small, personal payment from Charles Blackwood's accounts to the head of the Illinois State Police Highway Patrol Unit, dated the day after Maria's death. The memo line read simply, "For your discretion." Harrison Blackwood found this check 3 years ago during his own quiet investigation. Esperanza announced, her voice softening with a note of sorrow. He saw it. He knew what it implied. He knew his father was involved in his wife's death. But paralyzed by fear, by grief, by the sheer monstrousness of the truth, he chose to put it back in the file. He chose to believe the lie a little longer, rather than confront the man his father truly was. Harrison Blackwood visibly flinched, as if struck. He bowed his head, the camera capturing his public shame. The admission of his cowardice was more damning than any accusation she could have leveled. The stock ticker went into a free fall. 8%, 12%. The financial news networks, broadcasting live, began cutting to frantic analysts. A legacy of lies cannot stand, Esperanza concluded, her voice ringing with the moral authority she had earned through a lifetime of suffering. Today, that legacy ends. We will tear down the rotten foundation and build something new, something worthy of the woman my mother, Maria Elena Santos, was: a legacy of truth, justice, and hope. She lowered the microphone. In the ensuing pandemonium, as shareholders shouted and reporters screamed questions, she saw the flashing lights of police cars reflecting in the auditorium's glass doors. Jim's second tip had paid off. Victoria Carter was surrounded, her empire of lies and murder collapsing around her in real time. Esperanza walked off the stage, leaving the ruins of the old Blackwood legacy behind her, ready to build a new one from the ashes. 6 months later, Esperanza stood on the steps of the Cook County Courthouse. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the promise of autumn. She had just delivered the final victim impact statement in the sweeping federal case against the remnants of Charles Blackwood's criminal network. Her testimony, combined with the evidence from her mother's safety deposit box, had helped convict a ring of corrupt officials, judges, and social workers who had facilitated the theft of hundreds of children over 3 decades. She was not alone. Beside her stood a man and a woman in their late 40s. Tears streamed down the woman's face as she clung to the arm of an elderly man, her biological father, whom she had met for the first time only last week. They were the 14th family to be reunited by the Santos Blackwood Foundation for Children's Rights. Esperanza watched them embrace, a quiet, fierce joy swelling in her chest. This was her mother's true legacy, not wealth or power, but healing, mending the families that men like Charles Blackwood had torn apart. As they walked away, arm in arm, she caught her reflection in the courthouse's large glass doors. She saw a woman she almost didn't recognize. The tired, invisible girl from the gala was gone. The frightened, hunted woman from the zoo was gone. In her place stood a woman with her mother's eyes strong, clear, and full of purpose. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't just an heiress. She was Maria's daughter. She was Esperanza. Hope. Her father, Harrison, was waiting for her at the bottom of the steps. Their relationship was a quiet, careful thing, still being built. The wound of his past cowardice was real, and forgiveness was a process, not an event. But he was trying. He had poured his fortune and his energy into the foundation, working tirelessly to undo the damage his father had wrought. He was earning his redemption, one reunited family at a time. He smiled, a sad, gentle smile. "She would be so proud of you," he said. "She would be proud of us," Esperanza corrected softly. She looked at the courthouse one last time, a monument to the past, to the battle that had been won. Then, she turned away from it, her gaze lifting to the towering skyline of the city. A city that had once been a symbol of her oppression, a world that had tried to render her invisible. Now, it was just a city, a place to build, a place to create a new legacy, not of revenge, but of restoration. She took a deep breath of the cool, clean air and started walking toward the future.